Lord Michael Robbins stood on his balcony by the full moonlight, staring out into the vast, misty fields and rolling hills of Mifflin. The chill of an autumn breeze was broken by his large black sheep's wool cloak and long purple tunic, and his face was kept warm by his long black beard, flowing in the wind. The sheep were grazing in the hills, like they did every day, eating the tall grass and forbs. The peacefulness of night concealed the war that his hold was caught in. Every day, more and more were dead, and good troops were becoming fewer by the hour. Troops were becoming scarce in general, since there had been more coin to be made in peace by herding and farming. Men hadn't practiced or trained the way they did in days of old, so recruits had to be bribed, and provide their own equipment. It would have been an encouraging surprise if there were 1,000 halberds in Mifflin that night. Sir Kieran was beside him, the fork-bearded general of Mifflin's army, as well as Sir Connor, a rugged lad with a hard face who was often too eager to fight. "How much longer can I keep this fight going?" asked Lord Michael, downtrodden. "Only as long as your brother lives. He kills more and more each day, and now he has at long last slain Lord Purrington. This war seems winnable now," said Sir Kieran in his plate armor, vigilant with his halberd. "Yes, Lord Purrington is dead, and so my lord father has at last been avenged. But he had 5 sons, and the oldest now sits the stone throne. It will not be long before I have 1,000 longswords at my front gate ready to kill us all. They will seek revenge. Yet still, they started this war, encroaching on my land, settling beyond the trade road, deliberately trying to cut me off from caravans. The growing season has been poor as it is, and we need food imported from the Middle Kingdom. But the men of Larksvale are greedy and fat. They've been attacking the trading caravans, taking their goods back to their cities. Now any crops we can grow here have raised in price tenfold. My people starve while those ravens sit in the long hall growing wide on corn and potatoes." Lord Michael walked back inside from his balcony, into the throne room. He stroked his long beard as he sat on the ivory throne, a structure made from the teeth of slaughtered enemies and their mounts centuries past. The teeth of wolves, horses, men, and the tusks of pigs made up the seat itself, and a halo of ram horns were around the back, in a majestic tangle a yard wide and 3 tall. "We can only eat so many sheep before we ruin our own industry to the point of no return. I promised food for those who were successful in war. But if I have no success, there will be no food. Now many are emigrating elsewhere, if they don't get hacked to pieces on the way. What am I to do now? Send my men to die in war, or let them starve here? Which is the kinder choice?" Sir Connor went to his knee before the ivory throne, eager and proud. "It is not kindness that is needed in war, my lord. It is strength." "Strength I do not have. My brother cannot continually be the only one to survive a battle. One day soon, he will be overwhelmed and killed himself. The Purringtons are intent on destroying Mifflin completely. They will not stop until every last one of us is dead." He walked to the large table with a map of the 7 holds, with chess pieces strewn over. "Whatever grudge they hold against me, it is insatiable. I care nothing of the sins of my fathers, or theirs. Only what they do now matters. Now they take my land and kill my people." He placed a pawn on Larksvale. "My alliance with Wolfsweald is over. It was over the second I didn't show up at Larksvale's gates to attack the keep with them. That strategy was not as successful as I would have hoped." He moved the pawn away from Larksvale back to Wolfsweald. "Wolves never were easy to train, though. I'm unsure what choice I have left. I either sacrifice our independence or our lives. What a choice." As soon as my brother returns, inform him that he will be accompanying me. The only safe way to the Middle Kingdom is by taking a boat from Abercott, and I will have to buy the boat as well, since it will stay downriver." His knights stood silent. Nothing they could say would add value. They knew nothing but fighting. A wizard would have been helpful, but Adavi was far away, and their craft was taboo in the Seven Holds. Yet, the Puritans had a wizard of their own, from their own blood. They had once again denounced the old ways. Was it time at last for Mifflin to do the same? After writing a letter to Linwood and sending it by owl, he left and went down dimly lit hallways to his daughter's room. He had guards stationed by her room constantly. She was a woman now, 15 years of age, but he still viewed her as that small girl, with her wavy black hair and soft, kind, sparkling gray eyes reaching for him. She was all that he had left of his lady wife, the only family he had aside from his devil of a brother, Adrian. Demon was what they called him, and it may have not been too far off. His appearance in his armor was a horror. He had the horns of the ram on his helm, and a silvery plate he always wore into battle. His halberd had a broad blade, and the point itself had a long cutting edge. He had an affinity for dismembering foes, and the immense weight made that easy. Winter was coming, so when he would breathe, a long steam would come from his mouth. The stories said he could breathe fire, but that wasn't true as far as Lord Michael knew. He valued his brother dearly, and Adrian had killed somewhere near 300 in the war so far, though the fact that he was the only one to ever come back worried Lord Michael. Why is he always the only one? He shuddered to think of what that could possibly mean, but it didn't really matter. Lord Purrington was dead by his hand. That had been a long-awaited accomplishment. Lord Purrington was the most fierce warrior alive, and had easily cut down their father, Lord Cassian Robbins, less than a decade past. In fact, had it not been for Lord Purrington's black sheep, Mifflin might have been under siege before they could have done a thing to stop it. That thought made him shudder as he opened his little girl's door. She was sitting there in a small rocking chair beside her bed, reading a book by the light of the moon. "My Julia, please light a candle. You mustn't strain your eyes like I have." Once he had begun to lose his vision, he had gone to a wizard in Adavi who made him a set of magical glass spectacles that let him see across an entire room. He never told anyone about the origin of his spectacles, though. She smiled as she folded her book in her lap. "I quite like the look of spectacles, though. I think they make you look quite smart." "What is smart is taking care of yourself. You are all I have left. I had no sons, so you must inherit the ivory throne." He crept out of her room and took a small stick from the sconce. He lit it on the torch. His face was illuminated by its soft flame, and the dark bags beneath his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. "It is your destiny to rule our people, to keep them safe, to make them prosper." He lit a candle and placed it on her table. "And for that, you need to see. Any man who says he became better for his blindness was lying."
"And what of you, Father? When will you take care of yourself? You have grown horrendously thin. Growing your beard hasn't hidden it. And your face. You are a man younger than 40 years, yet you look as old as the hills. You must eat. You must sleep."
"I will, my child," he lied. "And you must as well. I came to say good night. I must take leave on the morrow. Pray for my safe passage." In that moment, he thought about leaving his brother behind, here at the castle to guard his daughter. But he knew the tall brick walls would do a better job than Adrian could. "I will do something I am not proud to do, no. But I must to keep us safe."
"What are you doing?" You mustn't do anything you would be ashamed of.
I plan to swear fealty to the Middle Kingdom. This war that Larksvale began cannot be ended by our strength alone. I'm sorry. The throne you are to inherit will not truly be yours. It will belong to a foreign king who cares not for our ways.
But we will win, yes? Good will overcome evil, at last?
Yes, at last.
At last were the words spoken in Mifflin to speak of a time of prosperity and peace, fertility and wealth. They were words spoken in longing, in groaning, in hope. That time will come, and at last we will be happy. There were no two words that conveyed more languishing or yearning. Lord Michael hoped that those words would not become more common after he had sworn their freedom away. He did not eat that night, nor did he sleep. He had denied himself either, since if his people couldn't eat, why should he? And sleep was never a friend of his anyway. He simply stood by his window, bathing in the moonlight, brooding, hoping. He told himself that King George was a fair king, who was kind like his father, Joel, who would lend a hand of aid without demanding fealty. He knew he hoped in vain. Word had spread that King George was a tyrant who made liberal use of his gallows, that he was not a man to be trifled with little patience and a low tolerance for nonsense. He has as much mercy as he has hair, it was said. From what he had heard, there was still hair around his ears, and a beard counted as hair, right? Nevertheless, the headsman's axe was used often in Mifflin as well, and Lord Michael himself was stern and impatient for foolishness. Perhaps he would be dealing with a man similar to himself, with 30-fold more power. The embers in the sky were being fanned to a flame when the servant came in. Lord Michael, it's about your brother. Welcome to the Storytime Saturday podcast. I'm your host, TGD. We got a new character this week. A new character, Lord Michael, and we see the Mifflin perspective of the war between Larksvale and Mifflin. So let's start with the writing aspect. I mean, there's not much to say about the writing in this one. I could nitpick it. I could pick it apart for days, but that'd just be a waste of time. So let's go over the characters a little bit. We'll talk about Lord Michael first. Now, Lord Michael is based on a friend of mine named Mike, even though I think his name is actually Julian, but he goes by Mike for some reason. Now, I'm not as close to Mike as I am to the other people I've mentioned, like Josh and Brandon and Jacob, Jordan. But when I wrote this, we had played a few D&D campaigns together, so we did hang out a lot back when I wrote this. But again, the character takes only the name and appearance of the real person. This guy doesn't have a lot in common with the real Michael. Now, the Lord Michael is always saying things like, my people cutting me off from trade. So if you read Brandon and Josh's chapter, they'll say stuff like our people or cutting us off or something like that. So Lord Michael is very possessive of his hold. He considers the people to belong to him in a sense. And I remember that being an intentional point of his character, that he pointed out, this is my hold. But that doesn't mean that he's selfish. He forgoes eating since his people do as well. There's no food there in a time of war and crops are down. So his people can't eat, so he doesn't either. And he doesn't eat. He could eat if he wanted. Like, the Lord of the Hold
does get the first picks. He's the head of the table and he gets the biggest piece of meat, but he's not doing it on purpose. Now, he has a daughter named Julia, probably intentionally named since his name is actually Julian. Now, Mike doesn't have a daughter in real life as far as I know. We see that Lord Michael, we see his perspective of this war against Larksvale, and he really views it as the war of Larksvale aggression. So that's he says they started this war. And that's something we get into in real life, especially, in history. When we say, well, that war was fought about this and it had nothing to do with that, and people fight a war for 1,000 different reasons. There could be as many reasons to fight a war as there are soldiers. So to point at a war and say, well, this war had nothing to do with X, Y, and Z. They fought for A, B, and C. A war could be fought for a lot of different reasons. But I'm not going to go on that rant today. incur wrath of the comments. Let's talk about Adrian for a sec. Now, Adrian is Mike's brother IRL, and he's a big and intimidating guy. I remember he was over at Josh's house, and Josh is over 6 feet tall. And Adrian looks right down at Josh and says, "Sup, shorty?" So this Adrian demon character is probably based on his D&D characters that frequently dismember foes. I remember I think he was playing a minotaur named Gracchus, who would literally just tear people apart, just grab them by the arms and tear them apart, like Stretch Armstrong. He played a gnoll named Captain Thraka Gruel, and he would just eat people. So, as the demon character in this book doesn't eat people, as far as I remember. But yeah, that was probably the inspiration, just a giant brutal guy. Now, there's a note about Adrian. Lord Michael, when he's thinking about his brother, he shudders, thinking why Adrian is the only one to ever come back from battle. That whenever they go out for battle, Adrian's the only one to ever come back. And I'm pretty sure my intention here was that Adrian kills everyone in the battle, including his own men. Take no prisoners, no survivors is the motto, I guess. No survivors on either side. Of course, Adrian IRL is a sweet guy. He would never do anything crazy like that. This character is probably based on his D&D characters. Now, a few notes. The place they live is Mifflin. And Mifflin is my clever little observation that Ireland literally means just angry land. Ire means anger. So Ireland is angry land. So I just took Ire and went to thesaurus and oh, perfect, miffed. If you're angry, you're miffed. So Mifflin. It's basically it's the same idea. So I threw in an Irish reference with Sir Connor here, who's literally just Conor McGregor. Now, Lord Michael mentions Lord Purrington's black sheep. And if you can't put it together, that's Ben. So Ben has something to do with this war in the East. Ben has something to do with it. The ivory throne that's in Mifflin is an absolutely gnarly thing made from teeth. So in Game of Thrones, every place needs their own special throne. The Iron Throne, the Sea Stone Chair, whatever. It's derivative. It's a throne made from the bones of his enemies. It's a bone made from the teeth of his enemies and the mounts. How they held it together, I'm not really sure. Epoxy, glue, I don't really know. But that's been the Storytime Saturday podcast this week. Next week, we get to actually see the perspective of the king, King George. We get to see what's going through his mind. We get a point of view chapter from the king. So that's going to be good stuff, I'm pretty sure. Come back next week to check that out. If you watch it on YouTube, make sure you like. Make sure you subscribe. If you're watching anywhere else, make sure you like there. Go subscribe on YouTube, the _Chalice channel. And I'll see you next week on the Storytime Saturday podcast.